So this is basically just a quick update of sort of the work groups in general. You hear individually from each work group itself, so you'll get a little bit better taste about what's been going on individually in those specific subsets. So quick question, what is this product that needs to be canned? Little brain teaser, does anybody have any idea?
Aki fruit. Aki.
Boom, yes. Anybody know why that's really important to make sure that before you can this stuff, you need to do something special?
Poisonous parts.
Yes, what part, do you remember?
The seed. The seed and there's another.
Around the arrow, exactly.
I have
So
a video I took.
that's right. Exactly. There you go. So, quite.
The seeds and what else?
Seeds in the around the arrow, there's a skin that has what's hypoglycin A and B, which is a poison. But the point is that there's a lot of products out there, and how does this fit into what we're talking about? We don't have Aki growing in the States, but guess what? We import this stuff, so we do have to make sure that the regulations are abiding by the regulations we have in the States in order to get that imported in. Today, there's about 13 actual companies that are allowed to bring Aki fruit into the country, and they're on the green list. I happened to visit 2 of them to do some audits of them, and really good operations. So a little just trick thing. You do have to make sure they're open though, because if they don't open up and allow time for it to expel some of that poison and dissipate, it becomes a poor thing. They have some great protection programs in place, and the country's done a great job in Jamaica, at least, has done a lot of work on this stuff.
Like fugu.
Anyways,
It's grown in Jamaica.
what's that?
It's like fugu.
This one particular one is so. Yes. Yeah, like fugu, right? Exactly. So.
Is this the same thing as what you might say acai?
No.
Or is those
No, that's what they're. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
How do
right.
you spell that one? How do you spell it?
E-E. A-K-E-E.
Anyways.
Anyways, something fun to learn about. But there's some great protocols in place, and obviously, nice to know they have some really good protection programs to make sure that we're safe. So what is the objectives? We heard about the general, so I'm just going to reiterate these right here. I'm not going to tell you them again. You can read them. But again, this is the core objectives that are still found within the working groups, and each one of the working groups will sort of feed back into this to make sure that you realize that there's some continuity and not just some working groups that are doing what they want to do. So the working groups that we just talked about, again, we got produce safety on one side. We were just talking about the needs assessment work group, the buyers group, and then the preventive controls for human food was broken out into 3 different separate subgroups as well to attend to the evaluation, resources, and awareness side of the actual preventive controls rules. And these are the some of the commitments for work groups and partners, advance NECAFS objectives we just talked about. Provide necessary resources. So again, there's resources that are available to help each one of the working groups. Transparent and collected data. So one of the big things we've been talking about is we're doing this work, we're gathering stuff. Who can have access to it? Well, it is going to be made available, and we want to make sure people know about it. We want to let you know about the methodologies. Hence why you guys see the needs assessment survey and those results for that. Increased communication work group members and partners. Again, we're starting to work on this better and better every time we talk about it. So, and we're going to be trying to put some new things into place for 2020 and beyond. Share resources and results. Again, we're just talking about that. And one of the work groups is resources. We're going to be trying to do a better job of ensuring that the partners that have a lot of those resources out there are in the forefront, and we make sure that we give them a good location so people can find it easy, basically. Audience definition, right? So our primary is going to be smaller food processing facilities. That's really the primary goal of our audience. We've had to bring in another layer, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the awareness side. The food safety communicators, and again, you can see the definition there. And these are those direct interactions with the actual producers out there and manufacturers that we need to actually work with sometimes, because it's tough to get to the first level. But again, trying to get to the second string, we're able to glean a lot of that information to be able to then pass on to both the food safety communicators and also the food processing facilities some of that information that we've acquired over the time. Timeline, again, we started last year in putting a plan into place once we created this all three of the working groups. And this is just sort of how we've sort of gone through last year in starting to sort of assess and begin to evaluate what our working groups wanted to do and put into play some of the things like the awareness survey and a couple of other really good things to get us going. So each one of the working groups will talk about where they're going to take it from this point on, but this just sort of gives you an idea of some of the collective work that all three of the groups have done together in order to sort of do the survey, because each one of them got something out of it, and then independently what they want to get out as their final outcome. All right, now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've got a bit of a frog in my throat, so if you can't hear me, please just let me know. Don't hesitate to let me know. I'd like to start out by thanking everyone who either took the survey or shared the survey. The results have been really interesting and really helpful to us. And so without further ado, I'll get started. So this survey was created by the NECAFS Preventive Controls Working Group using the Qualtrics survey software. And we distributed via email to both the NECAFS mailing list and to FSPCA, PCQI lead instructors in the Northeast. We also encourage people who received the survey through the mailing list to share it with people who they felt had good input and insight. A total of 103 responses were received, so again, thank you. And unfortunately, they were of varying levels of completeness, and the survey was open between August 16th and December 31st of 2019. So to start out, if you're following along in the stapled worksheet, this is, in the stapled handout, this is blocks 2 and block 3. So to start out with block 2, we have the demographic information on food safety communicators. So we first asked, please select what best describes how you work with small and very small processors. And so consulting and extension were our top 2. And then other was also tied with that and include incubators, which was roughly half, and shared kitchen owner managers, which was the other half, and a couple of other private non-for-profit educators as well. Then in much lower numbers, we had retail food operations, buyers, a couple of processing authorities, and then one federal regulator.
Andrea, I just want to say, there's only one copy per table.
There should be 2.
Okay. Just because people were looking.
I've already seen it. Wait, do you want to?
Yeah, there's 2 full copies of the survey. There's a bunch of survey summary sheets that go along on the table for each person. So. And then these slides will be made available anyway, so don't worry, you'll get them.
So then we asked, in what zip code are you based? The top 3 states were Pennsylvania, New York, and Massachusetts. We were very happy to have at least one response from all states, and all states in the Northeast.
Pennsylvania.
And we had 9 responses from the other states, 2 from Kansas, 2 from Michigan, 2 from Missouri, and 1 from Ohio. So not only one direct neighbor to the NECAFS states. One of the Kansas responders was from Manhattan, Kansas, so they might be affiliated with the K-State online degree program. And then this also has to do with responder occupation and location. We asked, in what state or district are the small and very small processors you worked with located? So again, the top 3 NECAFS states were Pennsylvania, New York, and Massachusetts. And 18 responders did say that they worked with other states outside of the Northeast, with a number of the responders stating that they worked nationwide with no geographic restrictions. So then we asked, in what product groups do the small and very small processors you work with process? We had ready-to-eat foods, followed by a number of the other responses were just people who wrote all of the above. Fruits and vegetables, and then acidified canned foods, candied chocolate, cereals, bread and baked goods, condiments, juice products, and then other beverages, seafood, dairy products, spices, soups, oils and fats, some mushrooms growers, alcoholic beverages, sprouts, and then no one responded with low acid canned foods, interestingly. Then we asked what food business size categories best describe all of the food processing businesses you work with. Small businesses were our top answer, so 500 or fewer employees using the federal definition. And then very small businesses came in at a close second. So these were people who are not quite eligible for the PCHF rule, but it's still in their interest to comply. And then we had farms expanding to sell value-added products, which I know a lot of people present work with, and then businesses not selling products. And then you had some people who worked with larger companies, home-based businesses, and a couple of people who declined to answer. So then we asked, do you conduct one-on-one or small group advice or assistant activities to help with small and very small processors comply with the regulation? So the top two answers were yes, but it's not my main responsibility, followed by no, but I refer processors to other people who do. So the bulk of the people responding did work directly with processors, but they do not do compliance assistance as their full-time role. But the third answer was that it was their main responsibility. So about a fifth of responders do work with processors for compliance. And then for our final question in this section, we asked the responders to rate their level of knowledge of requirements for small and very small processors and the preventive controls for human foods rule. And a lot of people rated themselves average or above, and there were only a handful of responders that had no to low knowledge. So our second section, we asked the responders to describe how they felt processors were adjusting to the preventive controls for human foods rule. So this section was titled Awareness, Knowledge, and Progress Towards Compliance with the Preventive Controls for Human Food Rule. So we first asked, to what extent are the small and very small processors you work with aware of the requirements and preventive controls for human foods rule? So they are somewhat pessimistic. Most people, 30% of responders, about a third, had them as average or somewhat aware, and close to average, but on the lower side. So it was about 96% felt that people had average to below average awareness of the preventive controls for human foods rule. Then to what extent do you think that these processors are knowledgeable of basic food safety and sanitation procedures necessary to be compliant with GMPs? A little better. So about a third rated them as average. Another third rated them to like below average but close. Only one person was completely pessimistic about this situation, but still these numbers are not where we would like them to be for this processing community. Yes.
Instructors for PCHF?
Some were. About a fourth of the responders were. Hey.
Yeah, just to read, we know that we couldn't get to the primary target. So the responses are based, just to remind you, the responses are based on the secondary users, so food safety communicators at large. So it's
And who they deal with and their knowledge.
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
It was me feel a little bit better.
Yes.
And then the last question, also somewhat pessimistic. To what extent do you think the small and very small processors you work with are knowledgeable about risk-based preventive controls? So conducting hazard analysis and implementing preventive controls for food safety hazards and writing a food safety plan as required in the regulation. And so not much better either. This is about 90%. With less than 1/5 rating them as somewhat aware, and then over a third rating them as being close to having little to no awareness. So then we asked perception of processor challenges and barriers. So our first question was, how important do you think the following challenges for achieving preventive controls for human foods compliance are for small and very small processors? And so we asked about these 6 topics: lack of awareness and understanding of the regulation, lack of scientific knowledge of potential hazards, lack of knowledge regarding cost of implementation, and then lack of understanding of the financial and business risks associated with noncompliance, lack of expertise in record keeping and documentation, and then lack of knowledge of basic food safety and processing procedures, and then lack of appreciation of the importance of producing safe foods. These were the top 3 responses that seemed to go with the questions that we had asked previously: low awareness and understanding, low technical knowledge, and basically not enough appreciation of how much effort that this would take. Thankfully, lack of appreciation of the importance of safe foods was very low on the list, so they felt that the processors they worked with were going to be open to making sure that they comply for basic reasons. Then we asked, how important do you think that the following monetary challenges for achieving compliance will be for small and very small processors? So these were all related to personnel and facility costs. So the top 2 we identified here were costs for paying third-party consultants, and then costs for hiring additional workers. These were tied. Tiebreaker I used was that this was on a 5-point Likert scale. This had more 5 responses than this, which had more 4 responses as well. But close on the heels of those 2 were costs of upgrading facilities and equipment, and then costs of trainings and enforcing compliance with current employees. Then for this question, we asked, how important do you think that the following training challenges for achieving preventive controls for human foods compliance will be for small and very small food processors? For this question, we had lower ratings overall for very and extremely challenging compared to the previous 2. But the top 3 we identified here were lack of time for training. Another important one was training content does not match training needs. The materials were too advanced for a lot of very small processors, and then cost for training classes. Thankfully, difficulty in finding nearby training classes was not rated as high. Not as high as the other question. Training content does not match training needs because the materials were too general, was not as important. And then lower was training content does not adequately engage the learning needs and styles. So it's mostly just the content being too challenging for processors who may not have a full line available to them. They may just be using a rented kitchen space. Then we asked, these were 2 separate questions, but I combined them into one. We asked about other food safety courses that survey responders felt might be helpful to small and very small processors. And so we asked how helpful these courses would be and whether or not the responders had taken this course or been an instructor for this course. So the top 3 numbers of instructors that had taken the course were the good manufacturing process training, good manufacturing practices training, the general HACCP course, and then the Preventive Controls Alliance recognized curriculum. And then these were also the top 3 for had been instructor for this course. And then the top 3 for very helpful courses were good manufacturing process training, sanitation training, and then general HACCP training. So the Preventive Controls Alliance recognized curriculum did not rank in the top 3, and it only had a 62% for very helpful or extremely helpful, indicating that there's room for improvement. But good manufacturing practices training was identified as the most helpful course for small and very small food processors.
For respondents.
Yes.
I just have a question. Why are we talking about the small and the very small together, given that they have very different regulatory requirements?
We had originally wanted to focus on, we had referred to them internally as small and medium food processors, but we just went with the federal definition for small and very small when we wrote the survey.
And NECAFS, our
yes.
mission is to focus on small and very small, so we bucket them as our broad stroke. That was one.
Because I took that survey and when I filled it out, very small, they only have to do the GMPs, so that's why I said GMP. So I don't know if other people.
That's another survey. Probably most of them might not be able to tease those 2 apart, or it would have been more complicated. We'll do another survey.
So then our next section focused on processor resource needs. So we asked, when contacted for further assistance in understanding the requirements of the regulation and developing a food safety plan, what types of information are small processors looking for? So we had template plans came in first, and then where to find training courses came in second, and then process authority contact information. So a lot of these, the top two, the second and the third focused on just hands-on interaction and more extended explanations of how to understand and comply with the regulation. And then we had where to find the PCQI course, private consultant contact information, extension contact information, regulator contact information, state then federal, legal advice, and then there were a few additional answers on other types of training courses. We also asked for we asked people to write in any other types of things that they found helpful or requests that they received, and most of them focused on people just wanting very straightforward, specialized information that focused on their product only. So that can often be a challenge when working with small and medium processors where they just really want just what's relevant to them. The other question that we asked was, based on your experience, what delivery methods are most helpful to small and very small food processors for understanding the regulation requirements? So similar to what was listed in the open-ended question that came before in the survey, one-on-one advice and consultation came in first, followed by training workshops. And then we had printed fact sheets and articles, videos, which were tied with webinars, websites, speaking engagements at conferences and meetings, newsletters, social media, and then other, and most of them had to focus on industry meetings and a couple of other helpful things that mostly focused on one-on-one interaction. So our final section was on the value of the FSPCA PCQI course. So 41% of FSPCA PCQ, 41% of responders were lead instructors. And questions in the section were asked of these participants only. So we asked, when teaching the PCQI course, which sections do you think are more challenging for small and very small processors to understand and implement? So the top three were validation procedures, hazard analysis, and then verification procedures, supply chain controls, and then writing procedures, recall plan development, allergen controls, and sanitation controls ranked lower on this list. But these three were very close in terms of having more challenging answers, but I believe hazard analysis, these were sorted out more, where validation procedures had the most strong, very challenging or more challenging answers as well. This is sorted by number of 4 and 5s on the Likert scale, where these being challenging or where these were considered very challenging or extremely challenging. So then we asked, among small and very small food processors who have taken the PCQI course, to what extent do you think that they will make progress on developing a food safety system and writing a food safety plan? So for the lead instructors, about 3/4 said that processors would come to them to take the course with a plan that was only about half complete or less complete. It makes sense that very few people would come to the course with a plan that was not fully operational yet, as they still had work to learn. And then we asked, to what extent do you feel that the small and very small processors would benefit from taking one or more of the following courses before taking a PCQI course? We had 5 courses and a course on risk-based identification of food safety hazards had the highest number of very helpful or extremely helpful responses, then followed by a good manufacturing practices course, which had the second highest number. HACCP came in a more distant third, and then a general food science course and general microbiology courses were considered to be not as helpful. We then asked if they use the evaluation tool provided by the Preventive Controls Alliance at the end of each course that they teach. So about 1/5 only used the Preventive Controls evaluation form. A third used the evaluation form and then added a supplemental form. And then another, 2/5 do not use the Alliance form, but they hand out their own evaluation forms. And only about a handful of lead instructors did not use any evaluation methods. So we asked, how useful do you think that the evaluation forms provided by the Preventive Controls Alliance are for assessing the knowledge gained during the course? About half agreed that they were somewhat useful, and then a handful believed had a really strong response that they weren't as useful. But generally, the attitude towards the existing evaluation forms was a bit more positive. We then asked if anyone conducted follow-up surveys at like 6 months or a year after taking the course, and people within the region currently don't do that except for one responder. And then we asked if they would be willing to incorporate a standardized evaluation form, and we were encouraged by these responses. There was about 2/3 said yes, another third said maybe, and only one person held out to say no. So I'd like to acknowledge, for acknowledgements, this work was supported by the FSOP grant. And I'd also like to thank Dr. Joe Fitzsimmons for helping me with developing the survey in Qualtrics. And so I thank you for your attention, and I'd like to know if you have any additional questions at this time. We do have additional time for discussion after the work group presentations as well.
Will you be looking to publish this?
Soon.
Okay.
Did you feel you were surprised with those numbers?
Not really. Some of the things did make sense. Yeah, there was nothing that really stood out to me, but a lot of things did start to make sense with like the challenges that people come with when they take the course.
What about everyone in this room? Just curious.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that during the discussion section as well.
Oh.
Go back to.
Oh, I will leave a discussion
Yes.
after?
Yeah, there's, the last part of the session is gonna be a discussion.
I'm sorry, I
But
can't.
I would say I'm stoked about that data in terms of, Luke and I have put in grants as an example of saying that there needs to be more on-ramping for small, very small processors and the soapboxes. Doesn't matter, my soapbox, if it doesn't matter if you have to apply the rule or not, like GHO, knowing's half the battle. If you don't even know, how are we supposed to get you on there? And we've tried to create programs for this, but funders is like, this isn't a problem, there's no evidence of that. So we're like, no, I'm telling you it's a problem. So this at least is valid. For me, you'd ask like if it's relevant, I'm stoked that we have data to support that we've been thinking it's a problem to kind of get the ball going.
I mean, this is why I exist for my company. I mean, there's a second eye going out because it's not being done. It's not, you have to look at the supply source of where you're buying from because there's a lot of problems out there. Yeah, so that's interesting.
So real simple instructions. We'll come back to those questions you guys have. Great things. Your question definitely relevancy. I think your question was really good. We're talking about very small and small. How does it reflect? Obviously, some of the results we're looking at. While we jump into the next thing, just quick poll. Yep, somebody figured it out. There you go. So if everybody just take a second, go ahead.
I said there's not polls.
So as you guys can see that majority of the people have answered educator in the room. PCQI instructors, again, these are probably your top choices. Is that correct when you guys selected? Anybody able to figure out my error when you guys are going through it and select more than one? No? All right, that was my error. Sorry about that. But at least we saw that most people are educators in the room. Auditor, consultant, tech support and stuff. Tied for third. Regulators. So, the question is, what's the relevance of this to our working group? And we were just talking about how do these working groups reflect what's happening in the marketplace, what's happening in educational levels, what's happening for that consumer report and support systems. So I think it's very indicative of also probably answers we saw also through the survey with the food safety communicators, right? Yeah. So there are some correlations to that. So anyways, we'll do a couple more just to sort of tease this out and sort of see what's going on.